Hello and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. Tonight we are chatting Piranesi.
We're all book cover
Clarke.
buddies.
Yay! And before we hop into that, remember you can find us at all the social medias. We are One Geek 411 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come hang out with us on our Discord server or shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Check out our website at onegeek411.com and watch us live on Twitch every Monday night at 6:45 Mountain Time. And find all our videos over at YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our Redbubble store for all your squid merchandise needs. I'm Shanine, and with me I have Emma.
Hi.
And Cameron.
Hello, hello.
All right. So I have a synopsis as well as some fun facts.
I like fun facts.
Yeah.
All right. Doing a synopsis for this one was wild.
It's something.
Something of a book.
Keep in mind, this is a book club discussing all the spoilers. So if you hadn't read this book, this is your warning and no holds barred beyond this point. So, Piranesi's world is made up of a labyrinthine house that is one with the ocean, where he spends his days visiting the halls and statues, caring for the dead, keeping meticulous journals, and performing research for the other. The other, Piranesi's only friend and the only other living occupant of the house, is invested in uncovering a great knowledge that he believes awaits them. Piranesi slowly uncovers evidence that the other, the house, and even his own identity aren't what he thinks they are. He eventually discovers that he was a writer investigating a group of scientists who are obsessed with finding another world and were ultimately successful. He was tricked into entering this new world where he lost his memory. A police officer came looking for him, the other got a little murderous, and the house was flooding and things got wild.
I would like to mention that the scientists were more like a cult
Yeah.
at some point.
At all points.
At all points.
It's
just
a,
for
it's,
clarification.
it's a little light on the science and
A little light on
a
the
little
science,
heavy on the cult.
on the cult.
This is their cover.
Yeah.
All right. So, this is an epistolary novel written entirely as a series of journal entries, which I am a big fan of. Giovanni Battista Piranesi, who lived from 1720 to 1778, was an Italian classical archaeologist, architect, and artist, famous for his etchings of Rome and of fictitious and atmospheric prisons he created from hallucinations he experienced while suffering from malaria.
Huh.
I did Google to try to figure out who Piranesi it was, and I was like, this architect's coming up, but they didn't work on labyrinths, so I'm really confused here. But that makes a lot more sense. I didn't get to that part.
Yeah. I got that information from Wikipedia as well as a reading guide for Piranesi from Women's Prize for Fiction. So, thanks, sources. Also, in the back of the book, it tells us what font they used for the book, which was typeface Perpetua, which is an adaptation of a style of letter used for stonework monuments, which I thought was very cool
And
very thematic.
Is that a common thing in books for them to tell you which typeface they use?
I have definitely noticed it in a few. I don't think all books,
Yeah.
but I'm noticing it more lately.
Some books will have it like in this copy it takes up its own page. Some books will have it be like a super small paragraph at the end of the page filled with other things. But it's becoming more of a thing.
Maybe it was Tales and Typos. I'm trying to go through our past. I feel like one of our recent book clubs did that too. And I was just like, I did not. Plot twist, it was not Tales and Typos. But yeah, I feel like one of our other book clubs did that, and I was just like, I didn't know that this was a thing, and then this one did it as well, and I was like, oh, I missed the memo on this.
I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but I feel like it's when they use unusual
Yeah.
type pieces that they pointed out.
That makes sense. We used a special font for this reason, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's hop into it. What are our first brief impressions?
It made me sad, but in a good way. A good kind of sad. That was my impression.
So I was kind of feeling this out like through our past couple episodes on the podcast because I was very confused. But I feel like this.
Admittedly read half of the book yesterday. The
Yeah.
second half yesterday.
Basically, same.
Yeah. I feel like this book was a roller coaster. Like, we'll say it that way. Like, I feel like the beginning, like, it almost reads like a mystery where, like, I feel like I now need to go back and read the first half again. Like, to get it. Because I did not get it until the second half.
Yeah, I definitely remember like the first couple journal entries. I'm like, what are even these words?
How is this world organized?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how do you have ocean tides and weather inside a room?
Yeah. Okay. So in my book, you can currently only see 3 tags, but that's because I already took out another 35. Some of them were like pertinent quotes, but a lot of them were just like, what is this? Or this feels important, but I am confused.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have just been one giant tag for me for the first 2 sections. Would have just been
Yeah.
I don't know.
A lot.
2/5, 2/6 of the what is that? 1/3.
Yeah.
Entire first third of the book.
Yeah.
But basically, when the opening quote is from The Magician's Nephew, I am sold. And it was epistolary. I actually kind of love when I don't know what's going on and I'm slowly trying to unravel it, like with the characters. So, first impressions, love it. All right.
Very well done.
Yes. Have you read other books like this? Either portal fantasies or epistolary or not knowing what the heck is going on or anything else?
I mean, technically we read Neverwhere.
I was to say, technically we've all read a portal fantasy.
Also counts as a portal fantasy. I've never encountered stories, like unreliable narrator stories, done in this fashion, in this way, and I really enjoyed it. Because most of the time, I mean, we'll talk about this a little later, but unreliable narrators, the narrator is insane and or crazy. But in this case, you can't really claim that for the narrator.
Well,
I mean, you can, but like, it's a different kind that is unwillingly inflicted. And I enjoyed it. It was a great approach to such a genre.
Yeah, I mean, I think unreliable narrators are usually a lot sneakier. Like there is the like mentally insane narrators that you can get, but there's also just biased where they're telling it from their point of view and what they know what's going on, but it's really hard to separate it as you're reading it, whereas this you kind of know that Piranesi doesn't really know what's going on, and that made it unique
it's
to me,
almost
I think.
like you are on the same level of information as the main character at the same time. He just happens to know how the quote-unquote world works, but that's it. That's the only leg up he has, is I live here. Otherwise, I don't know what's going on.
Yep.
For me, the only other other than the Bible, the only other epistolary book that I've read is Screwtape Letters, which does have some very similar vibes in that regard of like you're seeing one side of the story. Like Piranesi does a better job at like the other said this, and so it's kind of he brings in dialogue a bit more than Screwtape Letters, but that's really the only other book I think that I've read that's kind of follows that same format, at least for like the whole thing.
I like epistolary. The one that jumps out to me the most right off the bat is like the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. It's all like letters and notes back and forth, which is really fun. I always get this confused. Are Frankenstein and Dracula both epistolary, or one of them is?
I haven't read either, so I wouldn't know.
I didn't think Frankenstein was, but let me look.
That would kind of fit the Dracula theme.
Dracula is letters, diary entries, and newspaper articles.
Okay, so Frankenstein is a frame story written in epistolary form. Yep.
So those as well.
So yeah, I guess I've also read Frankenstein. I just didn't remember it because I didn't know it was a mystery.
All right. What was your favorite part of Piranesi?
I liked the part where he describes encountering the albatross and how they just sort of arrive and become his friends. Because it's like, it really shows the impact of non-human presence, meaning the lack of humans in a world, and how they, like, the animals in this world still, like, treat this creature with caution and whatever if he does something they don't like. But other than that, they're not gonna, like, if he's just there, he's just there. And he's cool. And I thought that was a pretty, like, nice little, like, world building moment that also connected into his, like, personal counting system, your measurement system.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like the year the albatross came to the third Western Hall or whatever. So
for me, I really liked the times where Piranesi has been warned about 16 by the other, but still trusts the other. I really liked this like dynamic of him like like being a good person and like genuinely like especially when he finds out about the flood and like trying to warn 16 and trying to make sure that they don't get killed in the flood, but at the same time like I can't read your letter because it'll make me crazy. Can't have that. And so I really liked that little bit of I guess back and forth. I don't know. That feels like a weird way to say it, but like his own internal struggle with how to handle this person that at that point he does believe intends to drive him mad and or kill him. So, but also again wants to keep them safe.
Yeah, because he also mentions at some point like, I don't want to hurt anyone. Mm-hmm. I don't want to kill anyone. Like, this person is a threat to me, but
go back to your own halls.
Yeah, I'm just gonna send you away. Bye. Jenny, you were gonna say something?
Oh, I was. Yeah. ask these questions, but I never like think of this ahead of time. It's hard to pick a favorite part. I think I don't know. I loved the way that Piranesi. I loved his worldview.
Yeah.
Just the care that he put into
Mhm.
everything, um, and the beauty that he found in everything. I think was just nice. Um, like the beauty of the statues and the care and respect that he had for um, all of the dead in the house that
Mm-hmm.
he didn't even know, but he was taking care of all of their bones
Mhm.
and yeah, like you said, Cameron, as well, like caring for the other and 16's well-being even when he wasn't sure that they were caring for his.
There was also a nice little reference to Doctor Who at one point
Mhm.
later on in the book. That was
Yeah.
another favorite of mine.
Yeah.
I put a star next to it. Um, Cited, it was a citation that I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, there was there was a few good references that I noticed. I know there's lots that I missed as well, but like Piranesi's favorite statue being the fawn that is like 100% tumnus.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Any least favorite parts?
Yeah. I think for me, the we don't have the did you find the world believable for this one, but so I'm gonna kind of just tie in my least favorite part with that. I did not like. I know it's supposed to be abstract and like labyrinthine, but like I feel like I could not really picture what was going on for the majority of this
Mm-hmm.
book. Like it really gets into like, especially we see it with 16, like having to write notes to herself so that she can find her way back to um, the first hall, so she can exit through the minotaurs. But like we don't really know what the halls look like geographically. We know there's a whole bunch of them. They seemingly go on forever, but like it was hard to imagine and like get in the moment of what like the scale of what's going on.
At some point, like 2/3 of the way through the book, we learn there's stairs that somehow intertwine
Yeah.
or like, work into these rooms. And it's like, well, okay, they go both up and down, but like I'm picturing they're like spiral staircases or whatever.
Yeah. And like we know there's multiple levels, but like because we're told that there's like the level that Piranesi's on, then below that is a level like a layer of water, then above that's a layer of air, like space or sky or whatever, where the birds are, or where they primarily reside till they come and visit. But like
Mm-hmm.
it's just like super vague, and I think that that's the point. But like it just that for me, I think really contributed to my being confused, especially for that first like third or 2/5 or whatever. And I really feel like this could have benefited from a picture in the cover or like towards the front of just two of the halls. Just
Or like
show.
having occasional, like, how some books, like some novels will have like one full page
Mm-hmm.
that's like a full page depiction every couple of hundred
Yeah.
pages.
Or like at the start
Something
of
like
some of
that.
the chapters or something like that.
Yeah.
I really think it could have really benefited from just again, especially in the beginning. I think it definitely gets better in the last portion with this, but again, it's like are the halls the same size? Are they all radically different? Like
Yeah.
it was just kind of hard to get into that. Do they all have holes in the middle for the water to come up? Like
Yeah.
I just found myself being very confused about the world.
Yeah. No, I definitely, that was a hitting point for me too. Especially since Piranesi mentions, like, on several occasions that he sketches a picture or two in his
Mm-hmm.
journal. Like, you would think that if the character is going to mention that and it's assumed that we are reading his journal, that
Mm-hmm.
then something along those lines would be included to if the author wanted to go this route of generalism and like wanting the reader to like assume they have the same knowledge as the character, then just include the, made up pictures that he apparently sketches.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fair point. I think by the end of it, I definitely had an image of in my mind of what it was, but in the first few journal entries, I was like, I had to go back and read them like 2 or 3 times because I was like, wait, I thought we were inside. Where is the water?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, and that kind of contributes to me back to the idea that from what I said earlier, like again, it kind of reads like a mystery, where you now need to go back and reread the beginning portions now that you know the twist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure it will make more sense if I went back and did that, but it feels like I need to do that now to understand those first portions versus it just being something cool to do.
All right. What are your thoughts on Piranesi as a character and as our unreliable narrator?
I really like. I'll do the complete 180 here. I love Piranesi. Like I love his character. I love the journaling. I love um the like. It's referenced in that one of the early portions. It's kind of the big tease for that something's happened, where he references that he has these journals that for some reason have this other numbering system, but that doesn't make sense to him. Why would he? Why did that happen? And so I really liked this idea of those journals, how they come back in. And so this idea that because this is his person, like this is who he is as a person, even once he's completely lost himself, this is still this critical part of who he is. And that kind of is what leads to him discovering what's going on. I loved that. Yeah, I thought that it was very cool. I love the inquisitive nature. And although I had some issues with that though, with him like never investigating where the other goes, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked that side of him. Then as an unreliable narrator, I know y'all spoke on it earlier. For me, this is my preferred kind of unreliable narrator, because Piranesi isn't not telling us something just to get a twist later. He's unreliable because he doesn't know, or doesn't know that he knows. And I liked that a lot. Again, that idea that the twist is him discovering what he's known the whole time, or used to know. I thought that was a very cool twist and a very cool take on this unreliable narrator.
Yeah. Pretty much the same. Like I talked about a little bit earlier, I really enjoyed the unreliable narrator aspect within this character because you get the sense that there's something we don't know that typically comes with the function of the unreliable narrator, but with Piranesi's personality and character that we get to know of being, trusting and honest and just like wanting the best for everyone involved, you get the sense that like, oh, like he knows as much as we do, like, and that's just the way it is. Like, technically he knows more, but he's not intentionally hiding anything, like you said, Cameron. Um, and I really enjoyed him as a character and like having his voice be the narrator for the story because it's like, yeah, he doesn't always like follow the paths of like experimentation, if you will, that you would necessarily think a character would as a scientist or whatever, like going to see where the other goes. But at the same time, you're like, okay, I can see how this character would, like, in this situation, be like, oh yeah, like I talk to him on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like for an hour, meet up with him. And then it's like, okay, I can find that believable, and you just let him go on his way because you have seaweed to dry and fish to catch and whatever. But it just felt like such a normal, like you were encountering a very normal person relating their life story, which was great.
Yeah. So, like I said before, I love Piranesi's worldview, and so I really enjoyed him as a character. Like, he's just so sweet and gentle and incredibly honest and forthcoming, which plays so interestingly with the unreliable narrator aspect. Because, like, he is telling the truth as he knows it, um, but still reading between the lines and, like, knowing that the things that he is saying is not what is truly happening. Um, like, I was super sus of the other right from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we're supposed to be. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
fairly obvious to an outside party that he is not to
How
be
are you getting
trusted.
all of these brand new outfits and, flashlight and sleeping bag and, all these
Mysterious
things that are
shining device.
very
Yeah.
clearly like, those things don't belong here.
Yeah. So basically anything the other said, I just like did not trust right from the very beginning, which then came back to bite me a little bit when he told Piranesi that he was losing his memory. And I was like, don't trust him. He's lying. And then I was like, oh no, that
Oh,
was
wait,
real.
he's
Wait,
actually telling the truth in this one instance.
Yeah.
wait, what's happening?
Yeah. With the other, I think that is a very interesting example in hubris. With like, because he lets Piranesi keep those first journals, which just seems like he specifically brought Piranesi in so that he would take notes and do all of this. But you left him with his notes that incriminated you? Like, or even if it is, we never find out for sure who tore out the pages. But
Right.
like, even if that was the other, you could have like scattered the pages in the real world where
Yeah.
Piranesi isn't. But like, I really liked the hubris of that. It is a very like curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do really like the other as an example of like this hubris villain.
Yeah. I mean, segueing us into our next question, what are our thoughts on the other as a villain?
I mean, I liked it. I liked him as a villain. Um, it was definitely as we got more information, like it was kind of fun to try and surmise which person he actually was. Like, there was a point where I hit personally where I was like, okay, it's very clear the other is like not a good person. But which person is he one of these people that we know of based on the information we've been given? Is he the actual head of this whole operation? Is he one of that person's right hand, men? Who is he? And how's this whole? And then you get um the prophecy guy. It's like, okay, if this person's this person and that person's that person, and they're surmising against each other, it was fun to like then go, okay, this person's a bad person, the other's a bad person, but who is he? Because that then informs my opinion of him. So I thought he worked in well, um, because like as it's been mentioned, like from the beginning he is definitely a bit suspicious, and we as the readers pick up on that, where Piranesi doesn't. Like, don't you see him? It's odd that, you know, this person comes and goes and only stays for like an hour
And always has nice suits. Like,
and always
that's one of
has
my
nice
favorite like
suits.
little details is
Yeah.
that every time they meet, um,
And Piranesi writes it in
Yeah.
detail.
It's like Susanna like makes that point to bring up that the other is nicely dressed. And I think that's like such a good touch because it's one of those mystery things of like when you look back later, it's like, oh yeah, because he's just popping in and this is what he was wearing in real life. And that's why he's dressed so nicely. Versus when Piranesi talks about his own clothes, it's always drab and everything's gray because all the color gets washed out or stuff.
Yeah.
And that's such a cool touch.
Yeah. So it really like we're given those indications from the beginning that all is not what it seems to be when it comes to the other. But that in many ways lends to the mystery because we're eventually told that hey, there's not just one person involved in, whatever this is outside of here. It's, this group of people who are very clearly either, mind controlled, if you will, or, whatever brought into this. And you want to know, like, okay, is the other like a willing participant in this?
Mm-hmm.
Is he the head of all of this? What's the deal?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting that he didn't end up being the head of it all.
What's that guy's name?
Lawrence Arnsales.
Yeah, Lawrence.
Was
and the other ended up being Ketterly, Dr. Ketterly. Who it seemed was very much a willing participant.
Yeah. But also, like, weirdly at odds with Lawrence as well.
Mm-hmm.
It was, yeah.
It was a cool, like, schism. And, like, I think that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about the other, was that idea of is he the mastermind?
Yeah.
And, like, I think especially once the prophet shows up, we get that, like, back and forth of them, like we hear them talking about each other.
Yeah.
And their impressions of each other.
She said.
Yeah, and I think that was really cool. And like, if you told me that this was a book with basically two characters, I would have been very concerned going into it. But I do feel like the other helps really carry it and provide enough to be like suspicious of that it kind of gets your brain turning. And I do like the other's motivations. I mean, obviously they're a psychopath, but like as a villain, like they're not like intrinsically evil. They're trying to research this place. Well, they are intrinsically evil, but they're not like trying to take over the world intrinsically evil. They're trying to investigate this place and they're going to dupe this person into doing it for them.
Yeah. Given they literally forced poor Piranesi into living here for 6+ years. Poor guy.
Yeah.
All right. It is still May, and our theme of the month is sages. Did we see any sages in this novel? And were they good or bad?
Plot twist, they were all bad.
Well, I feel like at times Piranesi was his own sage. Because he is like inherently a scientist and like he wants to learn more. And once he started to realize not all is as it seems, like he decides to explore that. But the rest of the people who do sort of fall into that sage role in this are just like, don't trust this guy.
Evil occultist.
Yeah.
Yeah, just don't.
Yeah.
Just don't. Don't go there. Which is a good example of the flip side of the sages. How knowledge can be used for personal gain and evil.
Basically, like, I mean, from like a mentorship perspective, it's basically grooming is what like the other's doing. But
which was definitely hinted at in this book, like,
and same with the prophet. Like, I mean, but they very much both have that. Like, I mean, like the prophet's a bit more like, from what we understand, is a bit more like the charismatic type, whereas the other is a bit more of the I feel like I'm owed this knowledge kind of thing. And so, but yeah, I like them both as characters and how they kind of bring in those both being awful versions of this archetype.
Yeah.
In their own ways too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, seeing them as sages definitely shows like a corrupted pursuit of knowledge and power. And yeah, just using people for their own ends rather than encouraging people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. How did your first impressions change throughout the novel?
Radically.
Yeah. Basically.
Yeah. Like again, for me, like with my initial impressions, like I describe this book as a roller coaster in the sense of like those first two sections. I really felt like, how did this book win awards? Not necessarily in the sense that it was bad. Like I enjoyed the writing. I think Susanna Clarke has an awesome writing style, but just in the sense that was like I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And then like again, you get to the latter 2/3 or 2/5 or 3/5, whatever, and it's like, oh, this book is amazing. Everyone should read this. Like,
Yeah.
I really feel like it, like her twist was so well done.
Yeah.
That again, it just completely flipped my impression, like a complete 180 on how I felt about the book.
Yeah. Pretty much very similar to you, Cameron, for me. But I went from being confused to being curious to feeling really sad for Piranesi in not knowing his place in the world. Because he has these 3 very distinct sections of his life where he felt he was 3 very distinct people. And the last one, he's just like, I don't know what to do with myself, given all of this knowledge that I've suddenly been handed, that I was trapped somewhere for 6 years and forced to research and essentially had my memory wiped to create a second personality, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just made me feel really sad and sort of heartbroken for this guy who's just like, I don't know what to do now. But to me, that's just a really good indication that the book was really well done. Because you start off like, I don't know what's happening. And by the end, you're like, oh, I want to help this person. So, yeah.
Yeah. I was really happy that I came in knowing 0 things about Piranesi. It definitely started out, first impressions, just incredibly confused. But yeah, so much changing throughout the novel. Um, I mean, I think I started out just thinking Piranesi was very naive,
Mm-hmm.
and I think by the end of it, I don't think that is the case. I think I started with the other thinking he was using Piranesi, but not being so like actively malevolent towards him. Yeah, I don't know. That's what comes to mind for me right now, but there was a lot. All right. Speaking of a lot, so much symbolism.
You get some symbolism. You get some symbolism.
Everybody gets some symbolism.
All right, let's start with the house and can bring in more world building discussion here if we have anything more to say on that as well. I have a couple of quotes to kick us off. So, about the house, Piranesi says, "It is my belief that the world, or if you will, the house, since the two are for all practical purposes identical, wishes an inhabitant for itself to be a witness to its beauty and the recipient of its mercies. And spoiler alert, the last line of the book is the beauty of the house is immeasurable, its kindness infinite. What are our thoughts on the house?
So it's funny, like looking back at that first quote and being like, I've never heard something so wrong in my life. Like, this is very much what Piranesi believes, and then like we find out through it that like, nope, this is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I had completely forgotten that quote. So this is like my first time, like, because it's like at the very beginning of the book.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
probably one of his first journal entries that we get. But yeah, it's just like this is so radically incorrect. But yeah, for the house, I really like this explanation of it, kind of like tying into creation myths. Like there's a lot of like language of like, again, like water above, water below, things being split with the house in the middle. Like it's a very creation style story in that sense, or creation style depiction in that sense. And so I really
God
liked that.
created the heavens and the earth.
Exactly. Yeah. And like the waters are formless and like are void, and like they take over. They're this disruptive force like that needs to be reined in by creation, kind of thing, or that is changed by creation, that kind of thing. And so that was something that like I thought was pretty cool going through that beginning section of it. I really liked the statues with the house. I really feel like those are, Shanine, to what you said earlier, I feel like those have got to be references to something that I just didn't get.
Well, and that does kind of go to like one of the things that we haven't really touched on yet that's brought up several times in this book. In the concept that the house is essentially this not parallel universe, but kind of like a pocket dimension type thing where forgotten ideas go to live. Essentially, like things and thoughts and sort of magic that seeps out of reality into a pocket dimension in a way that then like they need to be represented in some way, and it just so happens that some way is these beautiful marble statues.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Cameron.
No, yeah, and then kind of with that, like just building off it, I kind of like the idea of the house as like this receptacle for lost knowledge. Like that's very much something more so that we're told rather than that we actually see. But I mean, that's kind of like the other's whole premise here is that there is this and I guess in the prophets too, although it's a bit less pertinent to the plot at this point. But that's kind of like the other's whole premise is that there's this lost knowledge that he needs Piranesi to help him find. And so I very much liked that idea of like, this is where lost memories, lost worldviews, lost like civilizations, knowledge, it all kind of gets collected into this labyrinth. I really liked that as like this, again, as this depiction for this type of like, again, almost like, it's almost like the second creation. Emma, you said the idea of like pocket dimension, but like this idea that it's where all these other things, they just migrate there once they're lost in our world. And so I thought that was very cool.
They call it a distributary world?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how I then like pictured it mentally. For me was kind of like a pocket dimension. It's not exactly a parallel universe, but it's like it's something outside of reality, but
yeah, with all of the references to Magician's Nephew, with the magician being Ketterly as well, I kept picturing the house as like the wood between the worlds as a house.
Yeah.
I was definitely expecting us to be able to get into other worlds, and then that didn't happen. But
although it was mentioned that like several like towards the end when it's talked about that, like, oh, once you like open your mind or whatever, like several doors open up and like you just gotta walk through the right one. So this whole, weird thing that plays into the cult bit.
Yeah. I feel like it could very much play into the idea of all of Susanna's books are connected. Like, I haven't read her other works, but it could kind of play into that same idea of like, if there are other books that have, I just bumped my mic. Hopefully that wasn't bad. And I just messed up Discord. Sorry. Okay, we're back. That if you go through all of these other doors, you kind of just end up in these different planes or different things. And again, I kind of like this idea of like, oh, they're all connected because they're all just these alternate places that you can gather or that things gather.
100%.
Yeah, I think I'm still kind of trying to figure out what I think of the house. Because, like, Piranesi, I guess, almost views it as a god or some sort of powerful, benevolent being. And yeah, I don't know. Because it's hard. Like, was he just really good at adapting and living there? Or was there, like, things going on in the house that were, like, taking care of him in some kind of way? I don't know.
Yep.
But I do like that he still found beauty there.
Yeah, and I have some thoughts kind of along those lines with one of our other symbols. But I think it's very interesting of like the idea of is the house it's actually sentient. Yeah. Or is he like able to? It's like this is one of the things I was thinking of the other day. It's like, is he basically able to like manifest what he needs? Obviously, the other brings him specific things, but as far as we're told, he never deals with being hungry or anything like that. It just like does the house provide? Like, I don't know. I'm confused by all that in a good way.
Yeah, and I just made this little connection in my mind just now as well, is that like he does find comfort in the house a lot as well. And there's this specific part with the fawn statue where he's always viewed like it's holding its finger to its lip and shushing, and he always has viewed that as like a warning to be careful. But in this one particular moment, he views it as a like comforting, like, hush, it'll be okay, a comfort. And I don't know, I like that he can find comfort in the house, whether it's the house giving it to him or him finding meaning in something else. But all right, birds, there's so many birds.
So many birds. So many birds.
What do we think about all these birds?
So this is what I had as a follow-up for one of our feature symbols. The birds confused me. And same goes for the fish. Because, like, they seem so counter to everything else that we're told about this place. Like, everything else, it's supposed to be like this lost place with all this lost things. But there's just, like, birds and fish hanging out. Like, I feel like, again, I feel like it was one of the, like it's a symbol I didn't get. So this is one of those that I'm hoping that y'all can help me with. But yeah, I just felt super confused by that.
The one time,
because it's the ocean.
Yeah.
So birds and fish. Or yeah, there's a lot going on.
The one that really stood out to me was the owl, because it spends most of the book, like seabirds, seagulls or albatross or whatever, like birds you would kind of associate, like Shanine, you were just saying, like with that being by the ocean, given that I'm someone who grew up in Seattle and now lives in LA of all places. Like, I'm very used to seeing seagulls and albatross and cormorants and okay, yeah, I would definitely associate, those kinds of birds with being by the ocean, which is another thing that plays into this. But then towards the end, you get one appearance of an owl, and Piranesi even says it's the first time I've ever seen an owl, a real life owl, show up in this, and I don't remember the context around it, but it was definitely a moment of interest and I wonder why that was such a moment of note. That he sees an owl and mentions it's the only one he's ever seen. Because that's not necessarily something you would think about in a situation like this with everything else he discussed. But I just thought the birds for the most part were you've got the albatross that he kind of connects with and sort of sets that whole bit up for, but I didn't really see much of a symbol in them aside from that description of building a world where humans don't necessarily exist and what that would look like.
Yeah. I was having a hard time coming up with the symbolism because a lot of it felt very symbolic, but it was a bit beyond me. But the albatrosses did stand out to me, and Googling confirmed often literary references to albatrosses are referencing the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Um, and traditionally, albatrosses are an omen of good luck. In the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, the albatross is killed and then comes to represent a the weight of a mental burden.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The more you know. That all makes a ton of sense.
So that is one possible reason for a bird.
I believe it.
All right. And let's talk about Raphael, our heroic police officer.
Who the other and the prophet fought so hard for Piranesi to not acknowledge / hide from the entire time.
Raphael, formerly known as 16.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. I really like this idea of the idea of is like madness a bad thing? Of because the other's correct. Piranesi meeting 16 does drive him mad, but it really drives him back to what is normal. It drives him out of this. It's what basically is one of the big motivators for him getting out of this and investigating the previous journals. And so I really liked that idea of that especially during the mystery time for who was 16, that idea of worldview or paradigm shifting madness, that it's not easy to change the way that people think on a subject, but it can be very important to do so.
So what we're saying is the other didn't necessarily always lie to Piranesi. He just used Piranesi's lack of knowledge against him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, and I think this is something that's kind of interesting, is I don't think the other ever directly does lie. Like, the other very definitely withholds the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think the other actually ever says anything to Piranesi that's untrue.
Does the word Battersea mean anything
Yeah.
to you?
Again, a great example of hubris. Of like, you could
Yeah.
just not mention that and be fine.
Yeah.
Like, because if it does, you're now in trouble. Like,
Yeah.
you could just not mention this and be fine. But yeah. But yeah, I really like that idea.
Yeah. I think Raphael was a good representation of the real world throughout the course of this this book, because Raphael and like 16 as a character or was a solid representation of essentially the other's fear of Piranesi rediscovering the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
And like 16 was the representation of that fear the other had, and then Raphael filling in that role of 16 towards the end is the realization of that fear of, you know, Piranesi rediscovering the truth and, you know, the consequences coming for the other as a result of his actions. Because it was just this one continuous thread of like, oh, like if you ever see 16, hide, don't interact with them. Like they're a bad person who's, like you were saying, Cameron, like come to make you mad. And it's in the big picture, it's, you know, someone coming to help Piranesi realize what's actually going on and bring him back to reality, if you will. Like that madness is filling in the gaps in the memory.
So, interestingly, based on what you have all been saying about Raphael, did a little bit of Googling with this one as well. And Raphael is the name of the angel of healing. Not just the
You guys didn't
body,
know
but
that?
also the mind.
Yeah,
Oh.
I didn't. Yeah, I did not know that. We don't.
I knew it was the name of an angel, but I
Yeah.
didn't know specifically which one.
Um,
So,
Yeah.
I feel like that fits in what you have all been saying about her.
yeah, definitely.
I guess that kind of comes with being Catholic. You just sort of
Yeah.
know those things.
Yeah, that's not something I could ever have pulled out.
Not
So
that.
I could pull out the prayer of St. Michael right now if you guys really wanted. You know?
All right. Any other symbols that we would like to discuss?
oh, I got a big one. And that is how the world is changed after a big old flood. And like this kind of ties in with the whole this whole like creation story, Genesis narrative theme. I think it's very interesting what you bring up about Raphael being an angel, because like to me, again, it's kind of the idea of course the other is the tempter, but like the other is kind of trying to present Raphael almost as like the snake in the garden, like the one that like don't eat of the forbidden fruit, which would happen if you talk with 16. And then we get this like this flood narrative that is what really shakes Piranesi fully out of his worldview. I mean, you know, especially because it kills the other. But like, but yeah, this idea of like this flood coming in and being what changes the world, and the tide rises, and you must wait for it to descend before you can continue on to this new life.
Absolutely.
That's good. All right. Let's talk about the statues.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot. I have a quote. All right. Piranesi lived among statues, silent presences that brought him comfort and enlightenment. I thought that I thought that in this new old world that the statues would be irrelevant. I did not imagine that they would continue to help me, but I was wrong. When faced with a person or situation I do not understand, my first impulse is still to look for a statue that will enlighten me. So, what do you think of the statues in the house? And also, what do you think of the impact they continue to have on Matthew Rose Sorensen?
Matthew, for the people who've not read, is Piranesi's like person. Like Matthew was the scientist who then got shoved into the this pocket dimension, if you will, and who like got his memory wiped. Just since we haven't used that his full real name or what have you. But I mean, I think the statues for me kind of go back to that, like the representation of lost ideas in the world, and kind of like the fawn very clearly being Mr. Tumnus, and like what then does Mr. Tumnus represent, and Piranesi finding meaning in each of those things that comes from within himself rather than having outside influences impacting. He doesn't know who Mr. Tumnus is. Like, he doesn't know about the spare and the wardrobe that has a whole fantastical winter wood inside it. So he just sort of, sees the spawn that just he finds comfort in it and some own meaning for himself that relates to him without any outside influence. But I think it's really cool that they in this context, for just being statues, can bring so much to the story, in the sense of just like he likes to climb on them, and he puts bowls at the bases of the ones where fresh rainwater trickles down, so he uses them to collect water, but he also admires them and strives to catalog them all. But then, sort of on the flip side of that, in the like real world Matthew Rose Sorensen, like when he's back in reality, it's like he then has those influences that come back of he then sort of recognizes some of these things that society would implement onto those images and depictions. But he, like the quote sort of says, finds comfort in his own uninfluenced interactions with those, which I think is a great continuation of that sort of commentary on society as how would it look without, like, for someone to live without the influences of society while still some interaction of and with people.
For me, I think it's an interesting representation on the idea that art is whatever you derive from it. Like, that, like, sure, we have these ideas of shared narrative, especially once we get to the idea of like real world statues, but like the idea that again, this ties it very much in what you were just saying, Emma, but this idea that even without any context of the world around him, like Piranesi still like derives this meaning and these connections to these symbols, and to this art, even though it doesn't really mean anything, in the sense that he doesn't know what it represents, but it means something to him for what he derives from it.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that makes more sense. I think for most of the novel, I was like looking at each specific statue and being like, what does it mean? I was like, why is there a statue of a gorilla
Mhm.
specifically?
Yeah, I will say, one of my theories reading the book that was most incorrect was about the statues. Because I thought the statues were going to be things that had been trapped in the world. Um, Now, granted, I don't know what was going to happen with the Minotaurs, so like it wasn't a very well thought out theory. But like, because like there's stuff in there. There's the gorilla. There's the people playing chess. There's like all of these other things, and I thought there was going to be a more direct connection with like how things were lost. Um, that we never really got an like explanation for, which is fine. I don't think we needed one. But that was one of the places I was like most incorrect as I was reading the book.
Yeah, that's a good theory, though.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I guess I have this other quote about how Piranesi views the statues, um, talking to Raphael. He says, I do not see why you say I can only see a representation in this world, I said with some sharpness. The word only suggests a relationship of inferiority. You make it sound as if the statue was somehow inferior to the thing itself. I do not see that that is the case at all. I would argue that the statue is superior to the thing itself, the statue being perfect, eternal, and not subject to decay.
I loved this quote.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have more thoughts on
Uh,
this?
for me, I think it's a great representation for the idea. And again, this ties in more so. Like at this point, he's like getting to where we're going to start seeing real world statues. Like I think this is just like a couple pages before the quote that you read previously, um, and this idea that we we know that statues represent more than the thing that they're a statue of.
Mm-hmm.
Like even without getting into like why certain people have statues in our country, for Emma and I. Um, but
Yeah.
like statues obviously represent more than just what they are. They do represent this ideal, whether good or bad. But they represent a specific version, almost like the idea of how we historically remember certain people, which is obviously not how they actually were, or is not the complete story of who they were. And whether or not those stories are even fact, like thinking George
Yeah.
Washington and the cherry tree.
Yeah.
Like, but I think that it's very interesting, this idea that again, the idea that statues are less, but really they are this long-term depiction of this thing. They're monuments
Yeah.
to what the ideas
Of
were.
both that person and what they stood for.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I'm thinking like certain statues in the South
Mm-hmm.
that got torn down more recently in U.S. history. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think pretty much you said what I was thinking, Cameron, along sort of those routes. And just how long those, like, I mean, the quote says it all pretty much in the sense of like a statue lasts essentially for forever in comparison to the thing it's depicting. So that it's not just a piece of art, if you will, but it's a long-term statement
Mm-hmm.
of that thing.
All right. So, in the end of the novel, we get Piranesi relating his real world to the statues in a couple of different ways, I guess. Um, so, in one part, we have him thinking about the people that he's met, like Raphael and the other, and comparing them to statues that he knows. Um, I believe Raphael is compared to like a queenly type statue. Um, the other is compared to kind of a world destroyer. Um, and then we also have him out in a park seeing people that he saw statues of.
Mm-hmm. Which is where it got really trippy for me.
Yeah.
Like, or where it became really trippy again. Because again, I feel like it does beg that question of how do things end up in the house?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, again, like our presumption based on the prophet and the other are that they are this, these are the lost things to the world. So, like, are these people lost? Are they just wrong? Like, and the prophet and the other don't really understand it either? Like what's happening?
Yeah, I think some of that was playing a lot into the quote that I just read with the statue being superior because he saw an old man
Mm-hmm.
whose statue was like a king and just yeah, seeing again that like the real the real world is inferior to
Mm-hmm.
his statues.
The old man and the two little kids. Those were the
Yeah.
two that translated back, if you will. Excuse me.
I felt a little bit that the way that he was relating the real world to statues was almost like the statues were the pure like inner being of
Mm-hmm.
the people and you could see who they really were in the statues.
Mm-hmm.
um, like you couldn't hide their goodness or their evil.
Mm-hmm. It's something that, and obviously he only knows the other, but like earlier in the book, I wish that there like this idea had been brought up more about him like connecting the other two statues.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the book, it feels almost forced because it's basically like here is the character, here's how we feel about them at the end.
Yeah.
And it's very great like imagery, of course, like that, but it just feels very like here we are directly making this connection or very bluntly making this connection with these people and the statues that are going on. And so
Pretty much.
What does the novel have to say about knowledge?
You have to say. So one of the spots. So Piranesi as a character is a natural scientist who is just very curious about the world and um, definitely does not discourage that like exploration of what interests you. Just because something interests you does not interest other people doesn't mean your interest is a bad thing, because you
mm-hmm.
see like the other is super focused on this lost knowledge with mythical powers or whatever, and enlists Piranesi's enlist rather like force. But to help him find it. Well, Piranesi's like, I just want to catalog all the statues and like describe them all. Like, that's what I'm curious about. Like, what's the deal with these statues? And at some point, he has this whole like sort of little mini revelation of like, I don't think this great and powerful knowledge of the other is like worth being hunted down or whatever. I'm gonna go tell him that it's not worth it and that I'm going to focus on my statues or whatever. So like it's okay to have your own interest in or subject of interest in information. But at the same time it kind of made me laugh because there was one part when he got his new shoes from the other. I don't know if this was intentional or not, but when he puts them on, he writes, "They fitted perfectly." So technically incorrect grammar, incorrect whatever. They fitted perfectly. So might just be older English if that's a thing. I don't know, but very childlike in that three word sentence. But like for someone who's like, yeah, I'm a scientist and like I value knowledge. He's just like, look,
Worst,
guys,
a writer.
guys, I got new shoes. They're great. I love them. So, yeah, it's very clear, like a separation of like his scientific knowledge self and his general life self, and like in the search for knowledge, it's okay to take breaks.
So Emma, this one's for you. Without spoilers, the idea of knowledge here really reminded me about or reminded me of the Quinn from Horizon Forbidden West.
Yeah.
This idea that there are people that have knowledge that are intentionally hiding it from the people that it would be valuable to manipulate them.
Yeah.
Not going to go too much deeper than that for Horizon spoilers, but
For people who have not finished the game yet.
that was one that hit.
That's a great comparison that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this sudden but inevitable betrayal.
Janine, what did you
put
think?
it simply.
I think so. There's this quote, I think, shortly after Piranesi has started questioning if the pursuit of this knowledge is actually a good idea or not, where he says that the house is valuable because it is the house. It is enough in and of itself. It is not the means to an end. And I think that says a lot about the book's like two different paths of knowledge, where Piranesi's knowledge is the pursuit for the sake of knowledge, and the occultist's pursuit of knowledge is for the sake of power and domination, and how knowledge is valuable because it's knowledge, not because it can get you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
All right. What do you think of the ending? So, in the end, Piranesi does decide to go back to his old world. What do you think of his decision?
I really like the reluctance here. Like
Yeah.
it kind of has that idea of, I mean, somebody who was a prisoner, but then having to kind of get used to the real world again after being released. And so I thought that it was a very interesting depiction of that idea of someone who so is used to this one lifestyle that now when they have to be confronted with a different one, they're not really sure how to live. And I really liked the idea that in the end, he's not Sorensen or Piranesi anymore. He's now like, what is this new person?
He's a culmination of those sort of two different life experiences up to that point. Yeah, I mean, like I've said sort of throughout, it made me feel sad for Piranesi, and just like, because like Cameron, you were saying, that transition after essentially being trapped and by yourself for so long, whether you know it or not, going back to reality essentially can be a hard transition for anybody. And even given the like sort of routine that Piranesi had settled into, that he got so much like delight out of, in some sense, of just like daily going to get fish and watching the birds and seaweed. Like, even though he was trapped and had information withheld from him and used for other people's needs, like, there was a sense of simplicity to that way of life, from which he then went back to cars and money. And it's even talked about at one point, like, you have something I need, why won't you just give it to me if you don't need it? If I have something that you need and I don't need it, I'll just give it to you. Like, that whole concept, that struggle of readjusting to something, just made me feel sad for him and wanting to like ease him into it. But again, like I've mentioned, that is just a solid indication to me of, like, I mean, I would have a hard time imagining the ending going any other way and fitting the story well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if he just goes back to real life and is like, oh yeah, this is fine. Like, I remember being Matthew Rose Sorensen, and like, I'm going to fit right back in. Like, he remembers at the end what a police station is, and what all these different locations are, and has all these memories from his previous life. But that doesn't mean he doesn't struggle with that transition back into it. Like, you'd expect anyone to struggle with that kind of transition. So it felt appropriate for the story, even though sort of the rest of the story is very sort of fantastical and like, pocket dimensiony or whatever you want to call it. Like, it fits the story that was set up and given to us.
Yeah, I think along the lines of what you were saying, I think in the house, he never felt purposeless. Like, he was content and had some form of meaning in his life, even if it was just very simple. And despite the house being a place where lost things go, he was more lost back in his real world, um, not knowing what his purpose and meaning was anymore. And yeah, having to rediscover all of that. I think also having him choose to come back for loneliness was
Mm-hmm.
sad. That even only seeing the other like 2 hours a week, he didn't know, so he didn't feel alone.
Mm-hmm.
But if he had stayed beyond that point he would have known.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been too much loneliness for him.
Yeah, because he wouldn't have, at that point, had a context of what loneliness was.
Any other thoughts on what the book has to say about loneliness or meaning? Oh, okay. Did you notice any other themes, biblical or otherwise?
I don't think so. Again, I think there's like a lot of creation imagery, but other than the ones that we've discussed, I don't think there was anything else on my part.
To be fair, we've hit on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To be fair, yeah, we
Make
have.
sure there wasn't anything
We have
I
discussed.
was
We have discussed quite a bit of themes and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else that stood out to you, or any quotes to share?
As always, Shanine, you took the quotes I really liked and used them much better than I would have. So, a little thing that I liked. I forgot to mention this when we were talking about Piranesi, but one of my favorite things about him as a character is that scientific mind of like, oh, the flood's in X number of days. I need to warn 16. But how will I do that? I made up this calendar. How will I, like, the odds of them creating the same one is very slim. I just love that little like interlude of like, it'll happen on Thursday, but how do I know if they know what Thursday is? Like, I thought that was super funny.
Especially given like, it's like we as the readers know that's the normal like measurement for days, but his measurement of years is completely different. He doesn't know that like his measurement of days is the same as everyone else's. Anyway, yeah, that's the joke.
Yeah.
I'm just explaining the joke at this point. Jeez. Okay, yeah. So this was one of the when I was talking earlier about Piranesi sort of coming to the conclusion that this is the other's search for knowledge was like, you know, not really something he was interested in. One of the quotes in that section that I marked was, either way, it no longer mattered to me. I did not intend to waste my time looking for it anymore, it being the knowledge. This realization, the realization of the insignificance of the knowledge, came to me in the form of a revelation. What I mean by this is that I knew it to be true before I understood why or what steps had led me there. When I tried to retrace those steps, my mind kept returning to the image of the 192nd Western Hall in the moonlight, to its beauty, to its deep sense of calm, to the reverent looks of the faces of the statues as they turned, or seemed to turn, towards the moon. And that stood out to me just because of, like, we can come to these conclusions about certain things in our lives and not really know how we got there. And many times it's through these interactions with things or people or events that we didn't even realize in the moment was telling us something about whatever stage of life that we were in. And I just thought that was a cool, like, little acknowledgement of, you know, for Piranesi of like, hey, I just, you know, I went to see this thing for the other to get information, and I didn't even know I was debating this thing until I did this thing, this other thing for the other. And I just thought that was a cool little discussion, and that like moment stood out to me. So
The only thing I have left to share is a bit of a joke quote. that I read and was like, wow, that is some Victorian sitting room level of sick burn. He said, so Piranesi says, but the other is rather inflexible in his character. I would not go so far as to say it is a fault, but it is a definite tendency.
Yeah.
I just thought that was hilarious.
I feel like that's one I want to start using, like in my normal
Right.
vernacular. Like, I
Yeah.
wouldn't say it's like a bad thing, but it's definitely something that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yep, it's great. All right, I feel like this is a book that would benefit from multiple readings. So, do you
Yes.
think that this is a book that you would read again?
Yes. I would probably sit on it for a while. I'll probably sit on it for a while before I read it again, but um yeah, I think so. Giving it at least a second read through to like catch all the little things, knowing the full picture would be worth it.
Yeah, for me, like I said, I really want to go back and read the first two sections, and kind of just see what all I missed there. I don't know if I'll reread the whole book again, but I definitely want to go back and reread those first sections and maybe even through the third one when the prophet shows up. But yeah, go back and reread through those just to kind of get the full or better context for what is going on. Especially since it's not like a long read, so it's not like rereading Dune, so or The Robe. So
Oof. This one did not go on for far too long.
Yeah. No, I definitely will be reading it again at some point. Even just flipping through all my tags at the end, I realized that I had tagged like a ton of foreshadowing things that I like knew was important, but had definitely forgotten about by the time that it was like actually
Yeah.
important. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it will be a great book to go through again and be like, ah, I do know what's going on here. And then, yeah, see what else all I missed because there's probably so many things, which is fun for the rereadability of a book.
hmm
And do you think you will read more by Susanna Clarke?
Technically, at one point, I started reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I think, I mean, it's a longer book, but I think I got about a third of the way through. I didn't finish it. That's not to the testament of the book itself. I think I just got super busy, so I didn't have time to finish it. But I would like to pick that up back up at some point. From what I remember, it was kind of like a Sherlock Holmes crossed with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of vibe with an added like I think one of them was a magician or something. I definitely want to go back into it and like keep reading it um and see where it goes. So,
Yeah, that one is sitting on my shelf as well. I've been meaning to read it for a really long time, but again, that one is a bit more of a time commitment than
yeah.
Piranesi.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know a ton about that one either, but I've heard it's amazing and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, kind of the same thing y'all said. I'd definitely be interested in what else she's written. I don't really know. I mean, granted, I didn't know anything about this one until, the last 3/5 of it. But I'm definitely interested more in her work and what all she's done, especially since she doesn't exactly have like a large collection of novels.
Yeah.
So I mean,
She has what, like 4 books to her name or
yeah,
something in
there's
the
like
source.
it looks like it's like 3 major ones. Well, granted, one is The Ladies of Grace Adieu and Other Stories, and so it might
That must be like short stories or something.
Yeah. So it would kind of be fun to do the like I've read all of her works, that kind of thing. But
Right. Any final thoughts?
Would recommend to most people.
yeah, like I said, I really wrestled with that at the beginning, of just like why would people want to read this, But then I really think that by the end, it very much became one of those books that when we do our ranking of our top books from book clubs and do our tier list, like this is definitely going to be one that's higher up for me.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
going against my normal rank or my normal criticisms of books of it's either 1/3 too long or 1/3 too short.
This was a good
I
length.
feel like this was a really good length.
This was a really good length. Yeah, totally agree. It didn't drudge on for too long or didn't feel like it needed more. It was a Goldilocks. Just right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have no complaints. So, if you have made it all the way here and you haven't read it, you should read it.
Would recommend.
Our next book club will be on June 30th, and we will be reading We Were Dreamers by Simu Liu. I was going to Google again how to say his name, and I forgot to do that. But I'll make sure I know for book club next month. I'm pretty sure it's close to that, though.
Yes, yeah, it might be Liu. I don't know. Again, I remember us like having to look it up to make sure that we had it right for Shang-Chi, but no.
It's been so long. All right, but I'm excited to read something by him because he seems like a delightful human being. So
yeah,
that will be fun. Thanks for joining us for book club. We are First Geek 411. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Chat with us on our Discord server. Check out our merch at our Redbubble store. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch live on our Twitch and find all our videos over at YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And check out our website at 1geek411.com. You can find me on Twitter at The Hoot and Howl or on Instagram at Hoot and Howl Tales, TALES.
You can find me on all platforms as I am not prepared with an I in the prepared.
And you can find me as Humar Whittle.
Pet a dog.
Go read a book.